The CMA has updated their provisional findings, and now they seem like they're leaning a lot more towards letting the Activision Blizzard merger with Microsoft go through. Let's talk about what they found right now. All right, so we're going to read the website first, and here's what it says right here. It says basically the CMA narrows scope of concerns in Microsoft Activision review. The CMA has today issued updated provisional findings in its assessment of Microsoft's proposed acquisition of Activision. New evidence provisionally alleviates concerns in relation to supply of gaming consoles in the UK. Previously stated provisional view that deal raises concerns in cloud gaming unaffected. Investigation continues with final report still due by the 26th of April 2023. So the only concern that the CMA is still looking into is the concern with cloud gaming. Now, I've highlighted some of the key paragraphs here and the key talking points, and I also have the full document we can go over. So the publication of the provisional findings initiated a period of consultation in which the CMA invited responses to those findings from interested parties and continued to gather further information. I made a video about that where 6 people basically said they don't mind if the deal goes through. Having considered this new evidence carefully, together with the wide range of information gathered before those provisional findings were issued, the CMA Inquiry Group has updated its provisional findings and reached the provisional conclusion that, overall, the transaction would not result in a substantial lessening of competition in relation to console gaming in the UK. Remember, Sony is the one saying that Microsoft would be incentivized to remove the Call of Duty game from PlayStation, and therefore the big issue that was of concern to the CMA has been addressed, leaving just the cloud gaming issue, which is a much newer market. So I have to imagine Microsoft will continue working with them, and we'll get to the Microsoft statement in just a second and alleviate that concern. And then I imagine the deal's done at that point. The most significant new evidence provided to the CMA relates to Microsoft's financial incentives to make Activision games, including Call of Duty, exclusive to its own consoles. While the CMA's original analysis indicated that this strategy would be profitable under most scenarios, new data, which provides better insights to the actual purchasing behavior of COD gamers, indicates that this strategy would be significantly loss-making under any plausible scenario. On this basis, the updated analysis now shows that it would not be commercially beneficial to Microsoft to make COD exclusive to Xbox following the deal, but that Microsoft will instead still have the incentive to continue to make the game available on PlayStation. So the CMA looked at all the data that everybody submitted, and they're like, wait, so Xbox would lose a lot of money if they were to make this exclusive to Xbox, even with all the gains. And they actually go into that a little bit in the longer document, the 17-page document, which we'll go over. I highlighted some stuff there. It's interesting, but I didn't see any bombshells off the top of my head, but some interesting stuff. The CMA's addendum to its provisional findings today relates only to competition in the supply of consoles and not to competition in the supply of cloud gaming services, where the CMA is continuing to carefully consider the responses provided in relation to the original provisional findings. The CMA's merger investigation continues, and it remains due to issue its final report by the 26th of April 2023. Now remember, the cloud gaming concerns partially were addressed when Microsoft said, okay, look, we're going to let Nvidia have access to this, and they've signed with, I believe, 2 other cloud gaming services since then. I made a video about one of them, and the other one happened, and the case has been pretty nuts the last few weeks, so I might have missed a few of the issues. There's also some quotes here from the experts. Let's read those really quick. Martin Coleman, chair of the independent panel of experts conducting this investigation, said provisional findings are a key aspect of the merger process and are explicitly designed to give the businesses involved and any interested third parties the chance to respond with new evidence before we make a final decision. Having considered the additional evidence provided, we have now provisionally concluded that the merger will not result in substantial lessening of competition in console gaming services because the cost to Microsoft of withholding Call of Duty from PlayStation would outweigh any gains from taking such action. Our provisional view that this deal raises concerns in the cloud gaming market is not affected by today's announcement. Our investigation remains on course for completion by the end of April. Now, if you missed my Michael Pachter interview, you can check it out right here. But Michael Pachter basically said that the CMA is likely going to race to be the first one to say, look what we got Microsoft to say. Look how we got them to bend the knee to us, basically, right? So that they can look like they had a one up on all the other regulators, including the EU, who has indicated that they're likely going to pass the deal, and the FTC, who is currently in litigation with Microsoft. Now, the FTC case, Pachter believes, and I also believe, will wrap up once any sort of agreements with the CMA are made and the EU are made. They're going to present that to the FTC, and that case is done. The Gamers lawsuit was dropped. Everything's falling into place exactly how the analysts said from the beginning, basically. Like, people who are familiar with these processes said, here's what's going to happen. And I believe everything has happened exactly how they laid it out at the beginning. You know what else also happened? I recently hit 100,000 subscribers. So if you like my content, hit that subscribe button. If you're not yet, thank you to everybody who did. If you're already subscribed, you can hit that like button, because liking videos helps them get around YouTube. Now we're going to dive into the bigger document here really quick. This is the addendum to the provisional findings. It's a lot of the same info, but there's some interesting stuff in here about how they came to their conclusions. Since we published the provisional findings, we received new evidence relating to the provisional findings of a substantial lessening of competition in console gaming services in the UK, which we assessed together with other relevant evidence. In particular, the parties and third parties submitted new data that was not available at provisional findings and additional observations on the financial model that we used to measure Microsoft's long-term financial incentives for making COD exclusive to Xbox. The model uses the lifetime value of gamers who switch from PlayStation to Xbox following a total foreclosure strategy as an approximation of Microsoft's gains from that strategy, and the foregone revenue from all PlayStation COD gamers as an approximation of the losses. Our revised model now suggests that making COD exclusive to Xbox will result in a significant financial loss for Microsoft post-merger. Given the magnitude of these potential losses under all scenarios we considered to be plausible, we now place significantly more weight on the LTV model than we did at the stage of our provisional findings. Microsoft also made submissions on the nature of its past acquisitions of gaming studios and on its longer-term strategic objectives. In relation to its past acquisitions, Microsoft pointed to the similarities between Minecraft and COD, noting Microsoft's decision to keep Minecraft available on all platforms post-acquisition, in addition to putting it on new platforms such as Nintendo. In relation to its longer-term strategic objectives, Microsoft submitted that these are speculative and uncertain, and that they are already captured by the LTV model. Now, reading through the whole document, they kind of go back and forth on Minecraft. They're like, it's sort of relevant, but not really. COD's sort of a game in its own right. But yeah, I just thought I would mention that really quick. Our assessment of it, including the weight that we place on it, has changed in light of the significant losses that the LTV model suggests Microsoft would incur as a result of a total foreclosure strategy. We remain of the view that the acquisition of COD differs significantly from any of Microsoft's past gaming studio acquisitions, but we now consider that previous acquisitions, many of which were more in effect acquisitions of talent for the purpose of making new exclusive content for Xbox, are of relatively less significance in providing insight into the strategy that Microsoft is likely to pursue in relation to COD. We also consider that there is insufficient evidence to show that the less quantifiable long-term strategic benefits of a foreclosure strategy would outweigh the more tangible losses arising from a total foreclosure strategy indicated by the LTV model. As such, we now place less weight on Microsoft's past behavior and long-term strategic benefits in our assessment of Microsoft's incentives to foreclose PlayStation than we did in the provisional findings. So, long story short, it seems like they're basically saying that they're a little bit less concerned with some of the things that they had addressed earlier. And I just realized I had some of my effects. I want my fancy beveled edges. Come on, beveled edges. Like that's why the subscribers went up. It was the beveled edges I put on everything. Oh, real quick. I forgot to mention the Microsoft quote. So Microsoft responded to basically this and said to Verge, Microsoft says it welcomes the CMA's decision to fix its financial model. We appreciate the CMA's rigorous and thorough evaluation of the evidence and welcome its updated provisional findings, says Rima Aleli, Corporate VP and Deputy General Counsel for Microsoft, in a statement to The Verge. This deal will provide more players with more choice in how they play Call of Duty and their favorite games. We look forward to working with the CMA to resolve any outstanding concerns. And that's why I do think this deal ends up going through. I think whatever the cloud gaming concerns are going to be, they're going to continue to meet with the CMA until they're like, okay, well, like what? Do you want this on PlayStation Plus? Like, do you want players to be able to stream Call of Duty? Like, what's the concern and what specifically do we need to address here? And they're just going to let that, like, they don't care, because at the end of the day, people will, like, agreements will still need to be made for that sort of cloud streaming to come to PlayStation Plus, and PlayStation will probably just have to bite the loss on that one of having to pay Microsoft for those licensing rights, right? So they've also added all those other cloud gaming brands to the list. So I have to imagine they're going to be like, look, here's 10-year contracts for these 3-4 companies. Like, what else do we need to do here? Like, how do we get this deal done, basically? And thus far, it seems like it's going quite in their favor. Let's finish out this document and then I'll wrap up the video. There's a lot up front and then it kind of gets boring, for lack of a better term. But yeah, as a result of the submissions that we received after provisional findings, which we have taken into account, together with the evidence that we have received to date, we have now provisionally concluded that Microsoft would not have an incentive to engage in a total foreclosure strategy of PlayStation using COD. It does not make financial sense for Microsoft to make COD exclusive to Xbox. It just doesn't. As a result of our revised provisional conclusion on Microsoft's incentive to engage in a total foreclosure strategy, we have reassessed whether Microsoft would have the ability and incentive to foreclose PlayStation through partial foreclosure strategies alone. We have provisionally concluded that, although such strategies could degrade PlayStation's offering to some extent, they would not materially affect its ability to compete. So, even if the game was made exclusive, PlayStation could still compete. There is no reason that it would affect them to a point where they just would have to close up shop. And that's what we all knew, right? As such, we have provisionally found that Microsoft would not have the ability to foreclose PlayStation through partial foreclosure strategies using COD. On the basis of this evidence, together with the evidence set out in our provisional findings, we have now provisionally concluded that the merger may not be expected to result in a SLC substantial lessening of competition in the market for the supply of console gaming services in the UK. People are still going to buy PlayStations, like the 2% or whatever of people that would switch over to Xbox. It's not going to have a significant impact or a big enough impact on PlayStation, and PlayStation like makes different kinds of games. Like, they're just not worried about it. For the avoidance of doubt, nothing in this addendum represents a change in our provisional findings insofar as they relate to cloud gaming services. I like that they say, for the avoidance of doubt, we're still looking into cloud gaming. Like, we're still digging into them. Don't worry. We're gonna make sure that cloud gaming is also addressed. But like, I don't think anybody is worried about cloud gaming. Sony is worried about Game Pass. They're not worried about the cloud gaming market, right? And I don't think they're worried about anything in that strategy. And there was a story, I didn't do a video on it, but there was a story about how PlayStation's like, we want to make sure you support COD and VR or whatever, and Xbox is like, sure, whatever. Like, whatever Activision has been doing, we're going to continue to support. Now, I don't think in any of these contracts, Xbox has outlined what's going to happen with the Diablo franchise in the future, and I am curious what that means for PlayStation for the other properties that they have not focused on. And that's been one of my main criticisms of Sony's argument here. I'm like, you're focused on COD. You're leaving yourself open to potentially losing a lot of the third-party access to some of these games. Now, I don't know if Xbox is going to do that. They haven't really talked about Diablo and such. Not that I feel like they mentioned it one time, or it's been mentioned in one of these documents. If you know which document that was, or if you can find a link to that, let me know on Twitter or here in the comments. Anyway, here's how they came to this conclusion. First, we used users' LTVs and our survey results to estimate gains and losses from a potential total foreclosure strategy over a 5-year horizon. Then we use 2021 data from Microsoft Activision and SIE, as well as our survey results to estimate the gains and losses that result from a total foreclosure strategy on a 1-year basis. Sorry, I'm trying to go fast because the video is like going super long. I don't like to make like 22 long videos when I'm just reading legal documents. In terms of losses, the blank used in the PF express an estimate of the average yearly gross profit per COD gamer that Activision makes on PlayStation. It does not estimate the lifetime value that this gamer would generate for Microsoft by playing COD on a PlayStation or a PC or an Xbox already owned over time. This implies that there is a mismatch in the relevant reference period for the incentive analysis. Gains are computed based on 5 years of anticipated gross margin from a new Xbox gamer. So basically they're saying there's a lot we didn't take into account using this specific model. Microsoft submitted that when using a more recent LTV data and when taking into account 5 years of potential losses on PlayStation, the LTV model shows that Microsoft would not profit from a total foreclosure strategy. They would lose too much money, even if like everything happened in their favor, it wouldn't work out monetarily. PlayStation has too big of a player base. You're talking about, what are they at now? Like 150 million like if you include the PlayStation 4, I think it's like 100 million consoles or something. Don't quote me on that, but it's a lot. It's a huge market that they would just be flushing down the toilet, right? Specifically, Microsoft said that given the multi-year time frame of the LTV calculations, these calculations account for any longer-term benefits from a foreclosure strategy, including new loyal customers. Microsoft observed that the LTV covers a period over 5 years, so to the extent that Activision content can be used for this strategic benefit, it is already being captured into the medium term in the LTV calculation. Growing Game Pass, like they want to grow Game Pass, and reputational benefits. Microsoft stated that as withholding COD would directly contradict Microsoft's public statements, and that's important. Since the beginning, Microsoft has said we're going to keep COD on PlayStation. Since day one, they've said that. So they're like, we would get huge negative backlash. The effect would be likely to be very negative given the significant gamer backlash that would inevitably occur following a reversal. And then third-party views. According to this competitor, individual gamers tend to reduce their spending over time. So this approach for estimating losses would overstate Microsoft's losses through lost sales on PlayStation, I'm guessing, and thereby understate Microsoft's incentives to foreclose. They're basically saying that Microsoft is overestimating their losses. The CMA seems to not have agreed with them. We've considered the parties and third-party submissions on our LTV model and modified the inputs where appropriate. Based on our updated results, our quantitative modeling indicates that a total foreclosure strategy would lead to a significant net financial loss for the parties under all scenarios that we considered plausible. Our analysis indicated a net profit between blank billion and blank billion using the parties' LTV. Our results indicated a net loss ranging from blank million to blank million. We considered that the LTV model was therefore consistent with a total foreclosure strategy being profitable. I don't know why I highlighted that. Anyway, although we recognize that gains and losses from a total foreclosure strategy should be calculated over a similar time frame, we consider that this party's proposed calculation remains inaccurate. Since gamers not only spend on COD by buying games, but also through in-game purchases, which can be a significant proportion of overall spend, especially in free-to-play games such as COD Warzone. Similarly, we do not agree with the approach of calculating losses proposed by the third-party competitor. So they're like, I don't think that we should be calculating the losses based on the data that Sony is telling us to use to make the calculation. So they came to their own conclusion and they're like, no, this would lose too much money for Microsoft. It doesn't make sense. The parties submitted that we should include an assumption that these non-surveyed COD gamers do not switch consoles at all, which is PlayStation gamers. If you watch this, you're not going to buy an Xbox because you lose Call of Duty. You probably don't even play Call of Duty, most of you. I'm sure some of you do, but you wouldn't sell your PlayStation and buy an Xbox, right? That doesn't make sense. Anyway, we do not have sufficient evidence to precisely estimate that the switching rate of non-surveyed PlayStation and COD gamers. Fourth, in our provisional findings, we weighed our survey results by spend and game time on COD to reflect that gamers spend different amounts of time and money on COD. We now recognize that the longer-term ones affected already reflect the value of gamers, including the value of gamers who would switch from Xbox to PlayStation in response to a total foreclosure strategy. As such, it is not necessary to adopt a further weighting to approximate that value more closely. Finally, since our provisional findings, we have, in consideration to the party submission, also reconsidered the most appropriate way to estimate the annual profit per user for COD that Activision makes on PlayStation. We consider that this figure, which is based on monthly active users of a single month in a single year, may not be representative of COD gamers as a whole. People play COD differently. Again, they're like, that way of calculating doesn't make any sense. Instead, we consider that it is more appropriate to use yearly active users who spend at least 10 hours or $100 in 2021. Accounting for these changes, we find that the result of our updated LTV-based analysis lead to a net loss of more than blank billion over a 5-year time period under all scenarios. In light of the magnitude of these potential losses under any plausible scenario, we now consider it appropriate to place more weight on the quantifiable losses for Microsoft of engaging in a total foreclosure strategy post-merger. Microsoft would lose too much money. It doesn't make sense. In light of the parties and third-party submissions on Microsoft's past acquisitions, together with the context provided by the revised LTV model, which we believe provides important insight into the rationale to acquire Activision, we considered that it would be appropriate to revisit our interpretation and the weight that we place on Microsoft's broader strategic incentive to engage in partial foreclosure strategy based on its past behavior. In our provisional findings, we noted that Microsoft has acquired a range of gaming studios over the past few years and, with very few exceptions, has made their future releases of games exclusive or redirected the efforts of those studios to produce exclusive Xbox games. We recognize that Activision is a bigger studio than any acquired by Microsoft before, but concluded that this pattern of behavior seems to be consistent with Microsoft's commercial strategy. So they have made these third-party games exclusive to Xbox in the future, right? According to Microsoft, Minecraft is also a globally popular multiplayer franchise with a strong player community and social element that was available on multiple platforms when Microsoft acquired it. Like Minecraft, COD monetizes its content through a variety of channels, including subscription payments for multiplayer functionality, merchandise, and game-enhancing features. There's more than one revenue stream. In light of the significant change in the LTV model, we also reassessed the evidence of Microsoft's acquisition of other studios like Bethesda. We confirmed that most of these were, in effect, acquisitions of talent. The majority of studios that Microsoft has acquired, with some notable exceptions such as Bethesda, did not have regular releases of popular gaming franchises available on different platforms. The other companies that they acquired didn't release stuff on other platforms, so they're not as concerned about that. As such, Microsoft did not have to decide whether to make multi-platform games with a large customer base exclusive to Xbox following these acquisitions. It acquired these studios with a specific purpose of making exclusive games for its platform. Most first-party Xbox and PlayStation games are exclusive to their respective platform, and almost every studio that Microsoft has bought now makes games exclusive to Xbox, and I'm sure Activision will eventually also. Moreover, where Microsoft has seen value in making multi-platform third-party studio games exclusive to Xbox, it has done so. Example, the upcoming release in Redfall franchise following the Bethesda acquisition. I just made a video about that, so you can go watch that one. We consider, however, that the financial and strategic calculation of creating new exclusive games for Xbox may be different from that of making COD exclusive to Xbox. Making an existing multi-platform gaming franchise exclusives leads to quantifiable losses, which have to be weighed against uncertain gains. Moreover, in this case, at least part of COD's value comes from the size of the community of gamers, and that would have eroded by removing it from PlayStation, like longer queue times. It just would have been a bad idea. By contrast, making new gaming IP available on other platforms has some cost associated with it. To make Redfall for PlayStation 5, there is a cost associated with that. To make Starfield on PlayStation 5 also, there is a cost associated with that. And they're like, it's just a different scenario. PlayStation already has Call of Duty, so that cost is sort of built into the model. That leads to uncertain gains. So we consider these differences could reasonably lead Microsoft to make a different strategic decision in relation to new releases of COD than it has done in relation to entirely new games generated after previous acquisitions, especially in light of the significant quantifiable losses suggested by the revised LTV model. Our view is that the evidence arising from Microsoft's past acquisitions alone are inconclusive, basically. There's different results, right? Some of the stuff they could do, they include furthering Microsoft's strategy of expanding Game Pass. We know that. That's why they're doing this. We found that these longer-term strategic considerations were difficult to quantify, but on balance contributed to Microsoft's incentive to engage in foreclosure strategies. And then we're almost done here. Based on the evidence that we have seen, we provisionally do not believe that Microsoft would have the ability to foreclose PlayStation solely through partial foreclosure strategies. No duh. PlayStation's like the number one. Like, that argument was just so weak. And as soon as they looked at the evidence, they're like, yeah, PlayStation's going to be fine. We have not seen any robust evidence that suggests that PlayStation users would switch from PlayStation to Xbox at the same rate in response to partial and total foreclosure strategies. So even if that happened, they're not worried about it. We consider that it is unlikely that they would do so, since under a partial foreclosure strategy, COD would still be available on PlayStation. On this basis, we have provisionally concluded that Microsoft would not have the ability to foreclose PlayStation on the basis of partial foreclosure strategies. They're not making it exclusive. They're not going to damage PlayStation. And the conclusion of the whole document is, we have therefore provisionally concluded that the merger may not be expected to result in a substantial lessening of competition in the market for the supply of console gaming services in the UK. So that is the longer version of the original document that we read on the website, right? Long story short, the CMA has now come around and they seem more likely to approve this deal. Microsoft just needs to figure out how to address the cloud gaming concern. Let me know what you think in the comments below. This seems like a huge win for Microsoft. This was one of the final big hurdles that they had to get over. I think the FTC case falls apart once the EU and the CMA agree to something. The judge even said, well, what's going on over there? And Microsoft addressed that in the call. They said, well, we're still there in litigation over there. So I think once all this is addressed, they're going to give the FTC a package. All the regulators get to look like, oh, look what we made Microsoft do. And then the deal goes through exactly like everybody thought. Let me know what you think. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell if you haven't yet. Hit that like button if you like these videos. I hope you do. Thank you to the members for supporting. If you don't like all the ads on my videos, become a member at any level, and I post these ad-free for you to enjoy. Thank you so much. Just click that join button right down there. Now, if you want to see the 6 responses that I talked about earlier in the video, which were all very positive, or at least not concerned about the merger, you can check that out right there. I'm going to get out of here. I'll see you for the next one. Bye for now, everybody. Lots of news happening, by the way. Lots to record. A senator just called out Sony for having a 98% market share or something. We'll talk about it soon. Bye for now, everybody.